Okay, good afternoon everyone. Thank you for your attention and I hope you enjoy the presentation. So when it comes to human connection, it can be argued that there is nothing as important as our skills in communicating. With our friends, our partners, our peers, our bosses, our ability to effectively communicate with one another plays an integral role in how our interactions are formed. The same can be applied to the high-performance sporting environment. Regardless of whether it is a player under our care or a superior we are reporting to, the success of these interactions and the capacity to lead these people is predicated on our ability to create strong interpersonal connections through communication. Environments that foster communication between its members have shown to have positive correlations with social success, positive peer relationships, evolution of leadership skills, and community integration, as well as the development of social qualities such as cooperation, assertion, responsibility, empathy, self-control, discipline, and commitment. However, given that each stakeholder involved in the sporting organisation has their own motivations and agenda, conflict can be readily available. This unit has highlighted the importance of effective interpersonal communication skills, and in particular, how these interpersonal relationships impact on youth athletes. This modified Heldstats athletic triangle highlights how the athlete sits at the centre of the interplaying relationships between coaches, parents, teammates, and of course themselves. At my club, there has been no formal training or coaching regarding communication strategies and building relationships with athletes. And while there have been no overt problems within the club regarding communication, I believe that we can do more for our athletes by embracing what I have learned about effectively communicating. To do this, we will examine two constructs of team sport communication: explicit communication and implicit communication. Now, there can be no doubt that the explicit forms of communication are the most readily observable and as such make a logical place to start. Explicit forms of communication in team sport can take the form of goal setting, motivation, motivational climate, or feedback. Goal setting represents the shared communication of common goals. Whether these are at the training, game, or seasonal level, the congruence between personal goals, team goals, performance and process goals can impact team performance. Goal clarity in a team environment has been suggested as a potential predictor for success, while having settled team goals has shown correlation with player satisfaction, team cohesion, and perceived performance. Closely linked with goal setting is motivation. Motivation is a highly individualized concept, yet there are commonalities amongst players. The development of intrinsic motivation has been identified as the most effective strategy for long-term motivation of players, for encouraging adherence to programs, and engaging in the highest levels of personal development. The use of autonomy supportive coaching has been highlighted as an effective tool for developing player motivation, as it encourages players to engage in training more proactively and leads to greater levels of satisfaction. An additional factor of this is the motivational climate that is created by the coach. Duda and Balaguer identified two distinct forms of motivational climate: mastery-oriented and performance-oriented. A mastery-oriented climate, also known as task-involving climate, follows the principles that success is defined by skill development, process is more important than outcome, all players should be valued, cooperative learning is useful, and mistakes should be viewed as opportunities for learning. Counter to this, a performance-oriented or ego-involving climate emphasizes competition within the team, uses punishment as a form of reinforcement, and neglects the development of less talented players. The final of these, feedback, is perhaps the most important, as it is independently crucial but also linked to the evaluation of progress towards goals and has direct impact on the motivation of players. There are numerous forms of feedback, however they can generally be categorized as either reinforcement, instruction, punishment and reward, or the absence of feedback. The deliverance and choice of feedback is highly subjective, as no two players will respond the same and every player will engage differently with an alternative approach. However, some consistencies have emerged in the literature regarding the preference of individual feedback over group feedback and of specific feedback over general feedback. Now, while these forms of communication are highly visible, there exists a level of communication beneath them that impacts the team dynamic in a more passive and latent manner. ISHAC identifies 4 subcategorical commonalities in communication in team sport: team cohesion, power dynamics, conflict, and non-verbal communication. Team cohesion represents the likelihood of a team to maintain solidarity in pursuit of a shared objective or need satisfaction. Team cohesion, while an abstract concept, can be overtly recognized through the presence of cheers, terms, or mannerisms that are unique to the group and is reflective of a shared collective knowledge amongst the team. This is of course not limited to the players, but also exists between the coaching staff and administrative division. This concept is of great value to sports organisations given that team cohesion, while difficult to measure, has shown to be influential in the retainability of players and can improve team performance when compared to non-cohesive teams. Following this, the efficacy of coaching pertains largely to the construction of power dynamics within the club, which they themselves are created through interpersonal communication. Social power in a sporting setting can be categorised into 4 separate factors: reward power, referent power, expert power, and legitimate power. Reward power refers to a coach's ability to allocate benefits to a player, such as more game time or preferential selection, and is coupled with coercive power, being the ability to remove such benefits. Referent power is generated through an attraction to the coach due to their status, such as the case with club legends or high-profile figures. Expert power is derived from recognition of a coach's expertise surrounding a subject, and legitimate power is given to a coach by the organisation. Much like motivation, use of and respect of power is highly subjective and should be engaged in situationally. Now, no team in a high-performance environment can exist without some form of conflict. It is the methods through which resolution are met that are of the importance in a sporting setting. Laos and Setis found that of the 5 most common styles of conflict resolution used by coaches, the competing style, the avoiding style, compromising style, accommodating style, and collaborative style, the collaborative style was the most effective and valued. This is hardly surprising given that it is most extensively utilising communication through the resolution process. Interestingly, a 2017 meta-analysis by Washmuth and colleagues highlighted that poorly formed relationships as a result of poor communication were the most prevalent causes of conflict, and a separate 2017 study by Cranmer and colleagues identified poor communicative culture as one of the 4 primary triggers for conflict within teams. The final implicit form of communication I wish to discuss is non-verbal communication. This can take the form of facial expressions, posture, gestures, spatial positioning, touch, even silence. These are all valuable tools for communication, capable of encouraging vulnerability, openness, and comfort in an environment. And given that non-verbal communication transmits approximately half the information involved in interaction, understanding how what isn't being said can be interpreted is a fundamental skill for effective communication. So how do we go about creating an ideal communicative environment? Well, some of the changes are simple, such as setting short and long-term goals on both a team and individual level. Beyond this, however, the fundamental action will be to upskill the coaches on their communicative techniques. This can be done through courses and workshops, focusing on dealing and communicating with youth athletes, but I believe should be supplemented by an in-house program aimed at developing the communication skills between the coaches, which can then be extended to the athletes. To facilitate this, a specialist could be hired for the club to consult. In terms of evaluation, communication and its impacts on team performance remain a difficult factor to quantify. However, there exist a multitude of questionnaires and tools for assessing communication in teams. Some of the more applicable ones to this scenario would be the Scale for Effective Communication in Team Sports, which assesses verbal and non-verbal communication, the Youth Sport Environment Questionnaire, which quantifies levels of cohesion as reported by the players, and the Leadership Scale for Sport, which evaluates leadership relating to training and instruction, democratic and autocratic behaviours, social support, and positive feedback. It is my hope that by utilising this program, we can aid our club through engagement in advanced communicative behaviour so as to best serve the athletes going forward.